Hi historians, and welcome to A Historian Reacts to Season 4 of The Crown. Long awaited and long anticipated, and it's finally here. I have not posted in a very long time because things have been crazy in my life. I have, in no particular order, got married, got COVID, had to have my very old little dog put down, donated my hair, had surgery, and rescued another dog. All since August. So it's been a crazy time. But here we are. Normally, I give my new subscriber thank yous and my lovely commenter thank yous right here at the beginning, but there's actually been so many of them in their kind of 6-month sort of period that I'm going to do it at the end, because otherwise we'll be here for a while. I just have 2 things to say before we jump right in and crack on with the analysis. First of all, this is a deep dive into the historical accuracy of Season 4 of The Crown. If you are looking for a 10 things The Crown got wrong, this is not the video for you. We're going to go into what happened in every single episode and break down what happened in every single episode and pick that apart and see what's true and what's not. So if this is not the video for you, I'll check you another time. Secondly, throughout this video, I will be referring to Queen Elizabeth as Liz. This is not anything rude. This is a term of endearment that we use here in the UK. Queen Liz, our Queen Lizzie. So I'm using it for brevity's sake, but it's just know that it's not offensive. And finally, the last thing you need to know before we get into this video is I'm staying at my dad's house at the moment, and there are 3 other people in the house with me, and this house the floors are very loud, the walls are very thin, so if you hear footsteps, voices, I really apologise for that. I'm also stuck in this room, in my room, with 3 dogs, so if you hear any drinking, squeaky toys, etc., I am really sorry about that. I will try and keep it to a minimum and cut out as much as I can. Last things last, a couple of trigger warnings. We are going to be talking about terrorism, eating disorders, infidelity, murder/assassination, in a roundabout way the death of children, and depression and mental illness. So if any of that is not for you, then click away from this video. I don't want any of my content to inadvertently jeopardize anyone else's recovery. The very last thing I absolutely promise, please do not put any comments in my comment section that are hateful towards Charles and Camilla. They're human beings. We're here for historical accuracy, not for drama. And if I see one more comment about Harry and Meghan, I'm going to scream, because The Crown doesn't even cover them. So let's stick to the facts and let's stick to the history, people. And you know, we all like a little bit of gossip here and there, but no hate. This is a nice space. This is a nice space full of lovely people. Shall we get on with it? Let's get on with it. Episode 1, Gold Stick. Northern Ireland is seeking independence and the IRA activity is on the rise. Charles is still seeing Camilla, but is also now dating Sarah Spencer, spoiler alert, Diana's big sister. He's previously dated a Westmoreland, a Guinness, Caroline Longman, Anna Wallace, Christabel Borgia, et al. But Sarah is flavour of the month. Charles arrives at Sarah's house and has a brief meeting with her younger sister Diana, who's dressed as a tree for a performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream. They did meet for the first time at Althorpe, which is the Spencer family home, whilst Charles was dating Sarah, but it was during a grouse hunt in November of 1977, so no Midsummer Night's Dream performance. Charles's first impression of Diana, according to a 1981 interview with The Telegraph, was that she was very jolly and amusing and attractive. I mean, great fun, bouncy, and full of life, end quote. Diana's first impression, according to Andrew Morton's book, was that he was a sad man. Bodes well. Margaret Thatcher becomes Britain's first female Prime Minister in 1979. Thatcher has grown up twin children and thinks women shouldn't be in positions of power as they get too emotional. Her husband Dennis and Philip think 2 women running the country is a terrible idea. I'd love to say they were wrong. Princess Anne is now married to Mark Phillips. And is an Olympic show jumper. She's thinking of quitting the competition due to anxiety riding. Anne was, in fact, the first member of the royal family to compete in the Olympic Games when she rode the Queen's horse Goodwill in the equestrian 3-day event at the 1976 Montreal Games, where her family were there cheering her on. In 1988, she was appointed a member of the International Olympic Committee. Then we jump to the River Hofsa in Iceland, where Charles receives a call from Lord Mountbatten while salmon fishing, and Mountbatten gives him a good telling off for continuing his affair with Camilla. Charles bites back that he's a hypocrite who has affairs himself. Lord Mountbatten heads out from Castleblown Castle in Northern Ireland on a boat with his daughter and grandsons lobster fishing, where his boat is blown up by a bomb planted on board by the IRA. Lord Mountbatten died alongside one of his grandsons, Nicholas, and the boat boy. The rest were hospitalised. On August 27th, 1979, Lord Mountbatten went out fishing on his boat Shadow 5, on the Mullaghmore Peninsula in County Sligo. IRA member Thomas McMahon had slipped onto the unguarded boat the night before and attached a radio-controlled explosive. Just a few hundred yards from the shore, the bomb was detonated, destroying the boat and blowing off Mountbatten's legs. He was pulled alive from the water by nearby fishermen, but died from his injuries before they could reach the shore. Also aboard were his elder daughter Patricia and her husband Lord Brabourne, their twins Nicholas and Timothy Knatchbull, Lord Brabourne's mother Doreen, and a crew member Paul Maxwell. Nicholas and Paul were killed by the blast, and the 83-year-old Doreen died from her injuries the following day. Charles takes the news of his uncle's assassination particularly badly, and is given a letter Lord Mountbatten wrote him after their phone call, telling him to find a decent girl and act like a future king should. Thatcher sends condolences and says she'll wage war against the IRA with no mercy. Of Lord Mountbatten's death, she actually said, "His death leaves a gap that can never be filled. The British people give thanks for his life and grieve at his passing." The IRA formally accepted responsibility for the attack as a blow to imperialism. Philip laments that he never really knew his father and Uncle Dickie stepped up, which is true. Andrew was off with his mistresses. Andrew being Philip's dad. Then we hop to the funeral where Charles gives a speech. Liz, Charles and Philip watch the coffin descend at Westminster Abbey. On the 5th of September 1979, there was held a ceremonial funeral, and this was watched by thousands of people. His coffin was carried in procession on a gun carriage accompanied by all 3 British armed forces. Charles read the lesson from Psalm 107. After the ceremonies, which he had planned himself, Mountbatten was buried in Romsey Abbey. Diana and Charles meet again. Diana offers condolences for Mountbatten and commends Charles on his speech, which seems to really touch Charles. In fact, she said that he must be lonely, that it was pathetic and ghastly, watching him walk behind Mountbatten's coffin, and that he needed someone beside him, whereupon, in Diana's words, he leapt upon me and started kissing me. Charles calls Sarah, who's now getting married, to ask all about Diana. She tells him Diana's a kindergarten helper, she cleans for Sarah, and she's just turned 18. She lives in a flat in London with 3 of her girlfriends, and her nickname is Dutch, like a little duchess. All of the above true. Charles calls Diana to ask her out on a date. Episode 2, The Balmoral Test. The family are at Balmoral. The Thatchers arrive and are thrown out at being provided with separate bedrooms, having their suitcases unpacked for them, and being told what to wear and when. Despite Dennis having heard the rumour that all guests are submitted to various tests to see if they can fit in, they arrive early, all dressed up for dinner. Talk is stilted. Margaret is boring during parlour games. Margaret Thatcher, not Princess Margaret. And they refuse to sleep in separate beds. The following day, Thatcher is invited stalking the stag and arrives dressed in bright colours with heeled shoes and wearing perfume. She goes back to get changed, where Princess Margaret catches her sitting in Queen Victoria's chair, working on a bank holiday, and scolds her for not taking time off and not addressing people properly. The truth. Balmoral is the Queen's private property and a place for the family to let their hair down and have a rest from official duties. Thatcher did have a notoriously tense and strained relationship with Liz, and Thatcher's visit to Balmoral in 1981 was no exception. According to various biographers, Thatcher referred to Balmoral as purgatory and a different world. The Guardian reported that Thatcher did have to borrow a pair of boots as she didn't bring outdoor shoes, and one Whitehall official claimed that things were incredibly awkward with her during a barbecue where Philip cooked, and that Thatcher arranged to leave at 6 a.m. the following day. Thatcher's biographer Charles Moore says that while certain parts of her visit, as shown in the series, are surely wrong, the broad impression has the ring of truth. Charles arrives and tries to get Camilla to come and visit. She says no and earnestly suggests he invites Diana instead. Diana arrives with a warning from her chaperone Granny that it's the most important weekend of her life. Philip invites her stalking to get to know her better, and they get on really well, and Philip gets the stag finally with Diana's help. Diana leaves having impressed the whole family, and Philip makes it clear to Charles they want him to marry her, and no one has ever passed the Balmoral Test with such flying colours before. Charles worries she's too young and has a heart-to-heart with Anne about it, who says to get it done and put Camilla behind him. The stag is placed on the wall at Balmoral, a metaphor for Diana, who is swamped by the press as she heads home in Earl's Court. So, is there a Balmoral Test? Not really. It's more of an unspoken code of conduct that guests are expected to follow, like taking part in outdoor activities, wearing the right clothing, mucking in with the washing up, etc., etc. When Diana came to Balmoral in November of 1980, it was technically only her third official date with Charles, and she stayed with her sister Jane and brother-in-law Robert, who had a cottage on the estate. And every day Charles would call on Diana to do some kind of outdoor activity. There is no definitive answer on whether Diana and Philip went stalking. It's unlikely. But she didn't make the faux pas of sitting in Queen Victoria's chair, which guests did get scolded for doing quite a lot. And she went down well with the family for getting stuck in. They liked how easygoing, jolly and uncomplicated Diana was. According to Tina Brown, it was a big plus to Diana's cause that she appeared so happy tramping over sodden moors. Episode 3, Fairy Tale. Windsor Castle, 1981. Everyone is sitting around waiting for Charles and Diana, and the family are thrilled when she accepts his marriage proposal. A huge box of engagement rings to choose from, Diana opts for the now very famous oval Ceylon sapphire. She's still being mobbed by the paparazzi, so the Queen Mother suggests she's moved into Buckingham Palace before the engagement is announced to protect her from the press and to get her some lessons on transitioning from teen to princess. She is, after all, still 19, and Charles is 32. Diana says goodbye to her flatmates and has her cases sent to Buckingham Palace and makes all the wrong bows and greetings to the family on arrival. Charles and Diana announced their engagement on the 24th of February 1981 after having met only 13 times. They privately got engaged a few weeks beforehand on the 6th of February, but we'll ignore that. There was a bit of controversy over Diana's choice of ring, as it was designed by a jeweller who then featured it in his catalogue. And although it cost £47,000, there was upset at the idea that any old commoner with that sum of money to spend could go and buy one for themselves. The ring was actually based on the something blue wedding brooch of Queen Victoria's that Liz wore a lot, so it did have a sentimental meaning. After Diana's death, the ring was given to Kate Middleton upon her engagement to William too. Diana was absolutely hounded by the press in the lead up to the announcement, and they did make her life very difficult. Diana lived in the flat at Coleherne Court with her friends until the day before the engagement was announced on the 23rd of Feb, and her mother put the property up for sale for a cool £100,000. Today, that's worth about £2 million. So the engagement is announced, and when asked if they're in love, Charles says whatever in love means. Idiot. I'll try and insert a clip of him saying that here. Hopefully it won't get copyright claimed. If it does get copyright claimed, I'll put a link in the description box so you can see it for yourself, because it really is something. Diana later revealed that what he said traumatised her. The next day at the airport, the couple say their goodbyes as Charles goes on tour for 6 weeks. He suggests hanging out with Camilla to Diana while he's away, as she's the best company. Lessons begin in history, deportment, rank and precedent, etc., etc. Diana is bored stiff roller skating around the palace, and there is no one for her to talk to. She ends up sneaking down to the kitchen, binging and purging. Her letters from fans and admirers pile high. She practices speech giving. Maybe I should practice speech giving. 3 weeks go by with no word from Charles, and then she receives a letter from Camilla asking her to lunch. At lunch, Camilla makes Diana feel inferior by pointing out all the things Diana doesn't know about Charles, like he has a soft-boiled egg with everything, doesn't like garlic, etc. That his favourite colour is green. They speak to each other almost every day. She calls him Fred and he calls her Gladys. Camilla knows all about every time Diana and Charles have met. Diana purges again when she gets home. So, we know that being stuck in the palace was a very lonely time for Diana, and she did used to sneak downstairs and do ballet dancing in the night, and those were her favourite times at Buckingham Palace. Her eating disorder and depression were an all-time high then. Diana and Camilla did also know each other, and there was a famous meeting between them where Camilla told Diana, she had everything she could possibly want in life. She was a princess. She was beloved by everyone. What more did she want? And Diana said, I want my husband. The lunch between them did happen, though. 2 days after the engagement, Diana received this letter from Camilla. Diana said in the documentary, Diana, in her own words, that the lunch was very tricky indeed, but we don't know exactly what was said. Diana finds drawings in Nadine's office of a bracelet Charles is having made, inscribed with Fred and Gladys on the back. This is true. Diana, in fact, found the actual bracelet, not the drawings, mere days before her wedding in Prince Charles's personal secretary, Michael Colborne's office. Camilla also gave Charles cufflinks with interlocking C's on them, which looked like the Chanel symbol which he wore on honeymoon. Camilla still wears the bracelet to this day. Diana was devastated by the find and said later that he took the bracelet to Camilla in person to deliver lunchtime on Monday. We got married on the Wednesday. He defended the cufflinks as being a mere present from a friend, and Diana said, boy, did we have a row. Total jealousy. It was such a good idea, the 2 C's. But it wasn't that clever. Charles arrives home and goes to Highgrove, where Camilla is waiting for him. Diana wants to call off the wedding, but Liz refuses to see her as she's busy. Then we have the wedding rehearsal. Diana pulls Charles up on the bracelet. He says it's a farewell gift and he delivered it in person to tell Camilla it's over. He gives Diana the Prince of Wales signet ring. Margaret is picking up on the tension. She wants to put a stop to the wedding to save them both as human beings. Unlikely. Let's be realistic. Fireworks are going off in Hyde Park as Liz visits Charles to remind him of his duty and that if he works hard at his marriage, they will find love and mutual respect. It's more likely to have been a conversation that was had by Philip and Charles. Charles did genuinely believe he could grow to love Diana. He really, truly believed that. So then we come to the wedding day. The sun is shining. Thousands of people are gathered outside, but inside the palace, it's sombre. Charles and Diana married on Wednesday the 29th of July 1981 at St Paul's Cathedral in London, watched by a global TV audience of 750 million people and branded a fairy tale. There were 3,500 guests and everyone in Britain was given the day off work. 2 million spectators lined the route from Clarence House to see Diana. The wedding cost around 48 million, between 70 million and 100 million today. Their wedding rings were made of Welsh gold and they omitted the promise to obey one another from their vows, which caused a bit of a stir at the time. Me and my husband did that. There's no way either of us were vowing to obey each other. That would have been abused. Make me a cup of tea. No, you vowed to obey me. Diana's dress was around £9,000, or around £35,000 today, and was made of ivory silk taffeta, decorated with lace, hand embroidery, sequins, and 10,000 pearls, and had a 25-foot train. She also wore the Spencer family tiara and her mum's earrings. After the ceremony, they had 120 guests back to Buckingham Palace for the wedding breakfast and reception and their appearance on the balcony. They had 27 wedding cakes and 100 beacons were lit at night up and down the country to celebrate. The night ended with fireworks over Hyde Park, and for their honeymoon, they caught a train from Waterloo Station to Romsey in Hampshire. They stayed at Broadlands for 3 days and then flew to Gibraltar, where they boarded the Royal Yacht Britannia for an 11-day Mediterranean cruise. They then flew to Scotland to meet the family at Balmoral, where the press were given an arranged opportunity to take pictures. Episode 4, Favourites. It's 1982. 3 years after her election, Liz berates Thatcher for 12% inflation, 3 million people unemployed, rioting, and civil unrest. All true. Liz must be very upset at the situation right now under Tory austerity. Thatcher is crying because her son Mark has gone missing in the Paris-Dakar car rally. He was last sighted 5 days ago in a village in Algeria. She says Mark is her favourite child, which shocks Liz. Philip says that's just honest parenting and that Anne's his favourite. Liz says she doesn't have a favourite, and Phil says she's a liar but won't disclose who he thinks hers is. Spoiler alert, to no one whatsoever, it's Andrew, but probably not anymore, given recent events. Liz asks the Dean to summon all the children to her privately and asks him to brief her in their hobbies and interests. It's Edward's turn first, and he's bitching about his huge trust fund becoming dictatorial as head boy at Gordonston. Reveals he's heavily bullied and kids call him Jaws due to his braces. His A-levels are coming up, and he's already schmoozed his way into Cambridge despite not being predicted high enough grades. Elizabeth laments that Edward is lost, bullied and vengeful. Edward was head boy at Gordonston in 1982 and did go on to Cambridge despite his grades not being great, where he got a 2-2 in history, the same as Charles. Dennis Thatcher goes to Algiers, and the search area for Mark is 13,000 square miles, which is bigger than the UK, just to put that into perspective. The Argentinians and the British are also having a row over who gets to plant flags in the sand in the Falkland Islands. Thatcher refuses to back down despite Argentina sending armoured ships to protect their scrap metal workers who are trespassing. I can do a brief rundown of the Falklands War in this episode somewhere, or as an extra video. I will explain it somehow, somewhere. Next, it's Anne's turn in with Liz, and she moans about journalists and photographers being horrible to her, and she gets no thanks for her charity work, and she's jealous of Diana being fawned over. There are rumours of an affair with her and Sergeant Cross. Scotland Yard transferred him back to desk duties back in Croydon, and there's trouble in the marriage to Mark Phillips. Liz says to grin and bear it. Anne asks Liz if her answer to everything is to do nothing. Anne says she doesn't appreciate being labelled the difficult one. I will say, Anne, Princess Royal, does not get enough credit for her charitable endeavours. I met her at a plaque unveiling at one of the museums I worked at, and she was really nice and down to earth, and I'll make a video on that whole thing if you want. Let me know below. There's no evidence of Anne being jealous of Diana whatsoever. She was apparently indifferent to her from the very beginning. She had very little time for her. Sergeant Peter Cross began working as Anne's bodyguard and member of the Royal Protection Squad in 1979 and was reportedly removed from his duties a year later. In 1984, he sold a kiss and tell story to the News of the World for £600,000, saying that he lost his job due to an affair with Anne, and she used the code name Mrs. Wallace whenever she phoned him. Believe what you will. Anne's marriage was breaking down, and she would go on to have an affair with Commander Timothy Lawrence, an equerry to the Queen, who became Anne's second husband in 1992, but that is getting way ahead of ourselves. Mark Thatcher is found near the Mali border by a plane. Dennis embraces the pilot. They return home where Mark is being belligerent, pissing his sister Carol off enormously. Dennis told him off for not being grateful to the search team. So what happened? Mark did go missing in the Sahara Desert for 6 days on the 9th of January 1982 after breaking down with 2 teammates in their Peugeot 504 during the Paris-Dakar Rally. He was 29 at the time. Thatcher spent £2,000 of her own money on the search mission, and Dennis did fly out to Algeria to help. Him and his teammates were eventually spotted by an Algerian military aircraft on the 14th of January. This whole Paris-Dakar Mark Thatcher thing actually took place a bit before the Falklands conflict. Thatcher received a nice letter from President Reagan at the time saying his wife Nancy was praying for Mark's safe return. In an interview afterwards, Mark said they had only been 31 miles off course and he had read a book whilst waiting to be rescued, and that I was never scared for my life. Thatcher orders the Foreign and Defence Secretaries back to the UK as Argentina prepares to go to war. Prince Andrew is up next with Liz. He arrives by helicopter and wants to know what title he'll get when he gets married. Duke of York. He says he likes his new American actress girlfriend and tells Liz if they go to war over the Falklands, he'll fight on the front lines. Andrew was in the Navy at the time as a helicopter pilot and an instructor and as a captain of a warship. During the Falklands War, he did fly on multiple missions such as casualty evacuations, missile decoy targets, search and rescues, and anti-submarine and anti-surface warfare. So at the time of this episode, he had his Green Marines beret and was a sub-lieutenant moving into advanced flight training in 1982, and the Falklands kicks off in April 1982. So, the Falklands in a very, very small nutshell. Are you ready? 8,000 miles away from the UK, in the South Atlantic, was the British overseas territories of the Falklands Islands. On the 2nd of April 1982, Argentinian forces invaded. They had believed they had and claimed sovereignty over those islands for many years, and they really didn't believe for 1 second that Britain would attempt to regain such a tiny group of islands so far away. But Thatcher called their bluff and went in guns blazing. Her task force reached the Falklands in early May, and on the 2nd of May, the Royal Navy submarine sank the General Belgrano, and the Argentinians lost over 300 crew members. The Argentinians fought back with their air force, sinking British ships, but British troops landed on the island on the 21st of May against a very well dug-in Argentinian army, and they battled for the island's capital, Stanley, beginning on the 11th of June. The Argentinian forces surrendered on June the 14th. Back to the episode. A major Argentine deployment is on its way to the Falkland Islands. Getting 30,000 men there will take 3 weeks, but Thatcher says full steam ahead to get the islands back. Carol confronts Thatcher on why Mark is her favourite, and Thatcher says because she had a difficult relationship with her mother, she lets it affect her relationship with all women. Thatcher implies Carol is weak and doesn't challenge herself or have any ambition. Mark is stronger. Of her mother, Thatcher said in her memoirs, "I loved her dearly, but after I was 15, we had nothing more to say to each other." On the other hand, she adored her father, Alfred Roberts. As for Thatcher and Carol's relationship, Thatcher was around while the twins were young, and they were adults by the time she rose through the ranks to PM. Carol has said in a BBC documentary that her childhood memories are of her mum being a superwoman, working flat out and never relaxing. Thatcher taught Carol to drive, made food for picnics, was very domestically involved in the kids' lives. Her secretary, Lord Charles Powell, said the challenges of being a mother and PM were considerable, and to be perfectly frank, she rather failed. She rather overindulged Mark, where she perhaps underindulged Carol. Apparently, Thatcher told Lord Michael Spicer in 1995, "If I had my time again, I wouldn't go into politics because of what it does to your family." And then finally, it's Charles's turn to see Liz, and he invites Liz to Highgrove. Diana is pregnant and holed up in her room, refusing to come out. Charles tells Liz he's having a wild garden with no straight lines. He loves the house, his Shangri-La. Charles laments that Diana is unhappy in the country and shows no interest in guests and is intellectually incurious and wants to go back to London. Liz remarks on how close they are to Camilla and berates him for talking on the phone to Camilla every night while his pregnant wife is miserable. He needs to worry less about his own selfish wants and more about the mother of his future child. Liz is left feeling let down by all her kids, and that they're all a bit bratty. As she pores over photo albums, she feels all her kids are lost. Philip reveals that he thinks Andrew is her favourite. He was, up until recently, probably. Liz feels she especially failed with Charles and regrets letting nannies take over so readily, and that she didn't know how to hold him. It is true she had a much closer bond with Andrew and Edward than with Charles and Anne as babies. Philip says the kids are all adults now and must make their own way. The HMS Invincible and the HMS Hermes leave Portsmouth bound for the Falklands. Episode 5, Feign. An intruder at Buckingham Palace came through the windows and into Elizabeth's bedroom covered in blood in the middle of the night, leaving bloodstains on her bed. Michael Feign sat talking to Liz and smoking for 10 minutes about his girlfriend Liz in SW1, which is a London postcode, zip code. Liz was commended for the way she handled it and seemed to carry on unperturbed, but more on that later. 3 months earlier, Feign wakes up in a tower block of flats as the sinking of the Belgrano is happening. He goes to sign on and get his gyro, which is what you do for welfare in the UK. So you go to the job centre, you do what's called signing on. You sign a piece of paper to say you've been looking for work and you tell them everything you've been doing to try and get a job, and then you get paid your job seekers allowance, which now goes into your bank account. Back then used to come as a slip of paper called a gyro that you would then go and cash. So he goes to sign on and get his gyro, and he passes Buckingham Palace on the bus. He does a bit of cash in hand work, decorating, meets his ex at the pub who won't let him see the kids. As the RAF Falcon is going into the Falkland Islands, Feign is stood in a dole line. Again, this is the line you queue up in to sign on the dole. Welfare is the dole. To sign on the dole to get your gyro. So he's standing in the dole line as Thatcher preaches on radio. Feign's life, it's really important to stress, was really common under Thatcher's record high unemployment. Feign's story is that of so many others at that point in time, and so many others at this point in time in the UK, in the enormous recession that we're in. Feign goes to his local MP Richard Hastings to complain about how long dole queues are, because so many people are unemployed, the queues are so long. How rude the staff are, that hasn't changed. How the system is unfair, and how he doesn't get why £3 million is being spent on the Falkland Islands when people are going hungry in Britain. A sentiment shared by many at the time, and still shared by a lot of people right now. Hastings defends Thatcher and says facetiously, if Feign wants to complain about that, then he can speak to the leader of the opposition, or maybe he could drop in at the Queen in Buckingham Palace and have a word. Bet he wishes he never said that. As Liz is trooping the colour, Fagin is denied money to fix water damage in his home so he can have his kids come and visit. He hops off the bus at Buckingham Palace, scales a fence, climbs a drain pipe and lets himself in through the window. He makes his way to Liz's private quarters via the throne room, gallery, main staircase, and gets back on the bus without speaking to or being spotted by anyone. Alarms do not sound. Liz was at Windsor at the time. She doesn't want Downing Street to know, as they'll up surveillance patrols and police patrols even more. Fagin tries to see his kids but ends up fighting with their mum's new boyfriend, which mucks up the custody agreement, and it's now a no contact. The Falklands surrender, the people celebrate and sing Rule Britannia in the streets. Fagin jumps off the bus, breaks the now locked window, but still no alarms or CCTV pick him up. He goes to Liz's bedroom and sits on her bed. She calls for help, but the armed policeman isn't outside the door. She rings the service bell, but a hoover drowns out the sound. After washing his bloody hands, he tells Liz how Thatcher has ruined his life. He says, "They say I have mental health problems, but I don't. I'm just poor." He says kindness and community is gone. Thatcher is after Liz's role by being a president and she's power hungry. He thanks Liz for listening. She shakes his hand and says she'll bear in mind what he said as police escort him away. Liz asks Thatcher, if people are suffering, do they not have a duty to help them? And Thatcher says self-interested individuals drive the country, which is a very Tory notion that still exists to this day. The Prime Minister and Lord Mayor Admiral of the Fleet lead a Falklands victory parade. Thatcher does the salute instead of Liz. Phil apologises for not being there to protect Liz from Fagin. And then we have the end note. Following his arrest, Michael Fagin was committed indefinitely to Park Lane Mental Hospital in Liverpool. He served 3 months. He continues to live in London. The truth. The Falklands War ended on the 14th of June 1982. The conflict actually only lasted for 74 days, surprisingly, as it had such a huge impact on the 1980s as a decade in the UK. The same year, in 1982, a 32-year-old Fagin did scale the 14-foot barbed wire-topped walls of Buckingham Palace, shimmied up a drain pipe, wandered around a bit and found his way to the Queen's bedroom. Before that, though, he had broken in once before, in June of 1982, startling a housemaid who called security, but he managed to disappear before guards arrived. The housemaid was actually thought to be making it up because security was so tight. Fagin then entered the palace again later that night through an unlocked roof window, wandered around for half an hour eating cheese and crackers. He viewed the royal portraits, sat on the throne and visited the post room. He drank half a bottle of white wine before feeling tired and making his way back out. Whilst in there, he tripped 2 alarms, but they were believed to be faulty and security just turned them off. So then on the 9th of July at 7 a.m, he climbs the 14-foot wall for the second time, dodges the revolving spikes, and by 7:15 he's in the Queen's bedroom. Again, the alarms he tripped were chalked up to being faulty. He entered Liz's bedroom with a cut hand from an ashtray he had broken accidentally. Liz was awoken to the curtain on her bed being disturbed and Fagin sitting on the edge of her bed. She phoned the palace switchboard twice for police, but none had arrived. The armed guard at her door had gone off shift without waiting for his replacement to arrive first, so there was actually no one outside the door. The Queen was helped in the end by duty footman Paul Wybrew, who had come back from walking the corgis with 2 policemen hot on his tail. The whole thing lasted about 10 minutes altogether. No one knows what was said between Fagin and the Queen except the 2 of them. In an interview with The Independent in 2012, Fagin said he was barefoot and tipsy and scareder than I'd ever been in my life walking into Liz's bedroom. He said she was wearing a knee-length Liberties nightie and her voice was like the finest glass breaking as she asked, "What are you doing here?" He spelt it W-A-W-R-T. What are you doing here? He said there was no long conversation and that she ran past me and went out of the room, her little bare feet running across the floor. He said he had great respect for Liz, hadn't intended to frighten her. He confirmed he did trip the alarms twice, viewing George V's stamp collection. Wybrew arrived and stood watch till the police came, saying to Fagin, "Caw, fucking hell, mate, you look like you need a drink." He took Fagin to Liz's pantry and poured him a glass of famous grouse whiskey. Of his previous break-in, he said it was prompted by his wife leaving him. He couldn't find a toilet, so had to pee in the corner of the room where the corgi food was kept. That he felt like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, trying out different thrones, stealing wine from Charles's bedroom. He still doesn't know his motivation, saying, "I don't know why I did it, just something got into my head." He said magic mushrooms may have been to blame. At the time, the painter and decorator's life revolved around petty crime, drugs and mischief. He was more of a harmless prankster than a gangster, in his own words. Fagin had 4 children by wife Christine. She left him the year of the break-ins, but later came back to him. After the July 9th incident, he was charged with the theft of the wine because trespassing was a civil and not a criminal offence. He was committed for a psych evaluation and the charges were dropped. He spent the next 3 months in a psychiatric hospital before being released on the 21st of January 1983. 2 years later, Fagin attacked a policeman at a cafe in Wales and was given a 3-month suspended sentence. In 1997, he was in prison for 4 years after he, his wife, and their 20-year-old son were charged with conspiring to supply heroin. When asked by The Independent if he still did drugs, he gave a knowing grin. When asked if he had a message for the Queen, he said, "I hope she beats Victoria. I hope she lives to be 100, so I can send her a telegram." In the UK, the Queen famously sends everybody who reaches the age of 100 a happy birthday telegram. That's what he means by that. Episode 6, Terra Nullis, which means nobody's land. We're at the ABC studios in Canberra in Oz on the 26th of February 1983. Bob Hawke, if elected, will have to welcome Charles and Diana on their Australian tour. He says they're nice people, but Poms are a different breed and unelected, and he's not a fan. Margaret tells Liz that Diana is wretched in the marriage, not coping, and has bulimia. Diana insists on taking baby William with them on tour, while Charles spends the weekend with Camilla. Charles and Diana meet with Liz and Philip, who reassure them that going on tour will bring them closer. Prince William was born on the 21st of June 1982, so would have been 10 months old when they went to Australia in April 1983. They touch down in Alice Springs to pouring rain. William is screaming from teething as he's handed off to a nanny. Diana struggles with the heat climbing Ayers Rock, and Charles tells her to pull herself together and moans to Camilla that she's weak and fragile and immature as Diana flips out and refuses to continue the tour without William. So they drop all plans to go to him and give a press interview where he's seen taking his first steps. This interview did happen in New Zealand, though, as well as the one at Ayers Rock. Behind the scenes, all is not so rosy. Charles and Diana sit down alone to talk about their marriage. He says he knows about her eating disorder. They both feel misunderstood and that they get no thanks for what they do. Diana asks about the cufflinks and bracelet. Charles says it's harmless fun, and him and Camilla are just good friends. I've got no idea on the contents of this exact conversation, but we know that Charles wore the cufflinks during the honeymoon and that a photo of Camilla fell out of Charles's diary on the honeymoon too. Later on in that year, Diana would go on to find their love letters as well. Diana refuses to go to Highgrove because Camilla is there and asks where she fits in. Charles says she's his wife and he loves her, which smacks of whatever in love means. Taken aback by those 3 words, Diana says he's the cleverest, handsomest man in every room, and they realise they both need to support one another more, and they toast to a fresh start. They head to Perth, Adelaide, Darwin, then Sydney, happy, holding hands and smiling. They have the famous dance in the blue dress, which is so well done in the series because it was awkward as all hell in real life. Diana invites Charles to her bedroom in the morning. Charles refuses to return Camilla's calls. So, Diana did struggle and not climb Ayers Rock, but not due to the heat. It was due to her wearing a skirt, and it was really windy, and there were photographers below, and she was worried they would catch her in an unflattering photo. There's no evidence from Diana's memoirs that they had heart-to-heart, and Diana was really quite candid after her divorce with Charles about everything. The trip actually drove a real wedge between them. In fact, there is a photo outside the Sydney Opera House that a photographer snapped of Diana crying for a moment. So all was definitely not rosy with the couple in Sydney. Charles was said by the photographer who took the photo to have not even noticed that Diana was crying, which was typical of him. What is true is Diana's winning over of the Australian public. The people adored her as an atypical royal who shook hands with people and looked them in the eye instead of waving from cars. She was seen as a vulnerable, likeable, down-to-earth wife and mother. People came out in droves to see Diana, and Charles did feel extremely overshadowed. The people chanting, "We want Di," that didn't happen. And Charles wasn't booed at a polo match because Diana wasn't there with him. Diana was actually in the stands watching, and he did fall off his horse during a game at Warwick Farm, but not to cheers as he fell. He was actually pushed by a competitor and laughed about the fall afterwards in a speech. Diana later said of the trip, "With the media attention came a lot of jealousy. A great deal of complicated situations arose because of that. He took it out on me. I understood the jealousy, but I couldn't explain that I didn't ask for it." In Tasmania, they argue over Diana pulling faces and embarrassing him while he was giving him a speech. In the actual footage of the speech, I will hopefully insert and not get copyright claimed, but if I do get copyright claimed, I will put the link below so you can go and watch it. She barely makes any kind of face, but the audience laughs regardless, and Charles quips, "It's amazing what ladies will do when your back is turned." She was actually kind of blushing over the compliment he paid her, and there were laughs all round. They finally meet the Prime Minister, Robert Hawke, who's never called the Queen a pig, by the way. He tells Charles that Diana has made them both look stupid. Hawke had hoped people would respond to the visit badly, but fairy tale superstar Di has turned everyone bananas. There's no evidence that Hawke told Charles Diana made them look like chumps, but Diana's visit did seem to boost the previously declining Aussie public support for the monarchy. Hawke's visions of a republic are yet to come to fruition to this very day. Throughout the trip, Diana descends into anxiety, depression, and her bulimia returns as Charles becomes more resentful. Diana later admitted her eating disorder made the jet lag and sunburn and heat even harder to handle. On landing back in the UK, they take separate cars, Charles to Highgrove and Diana to Kensington Palace. Diana visits Liz, calls her mama, and admits she's struggling. Liz suggests she may be enjoying her own success too much, and talking behind Charles's back won't help. Diana is overstepping the mark, playing to the gallery. Diana says she just wants love and approval from her mama, and hugs Liz, who doesn't return the affection. Margaret ominously says if Diana doesn't bend to fit the family, she will break. The hug scene isn't entirely based in fiction. I don't know whether there was an actual hug or what was exactly said, but Diana did go and see Liz when the marriage was crumbling, and she cried through the whole hour-long meeting, though this wasn't until 1986, after Charles's infidelity was fully exposed. Of the meeting, Diana said, "So I went to the top lady sobbing and said, 'What do I do?' And she said, 'I don't know what you should do. Charles is hopeless.' So I didn't go back to her again for help." Di wanted Liz to step in and intervene on her behalf, and Liz thought Diana should just stop being silly and get on with it. But Diana would not be swept under the carpet so easily. Episode 7, The Hereditary Principle. The Entertainment Artists Benevolent Ball Fund is watched on TV by people in a mental health facility. Margaret has a guy over she's been seeing for a few months, and he breaks it off with her to go and join the church. Liz said he was never right for her because he's a friend of Dorothy's, which means he's gay. Dazzle, Derek Jennings, was a real Catholic priest with whom Margaret had a close relationship after the messy breakup with Roddy Llewellyn. He left behind his civil service life and took holy orders in 1984. He was a great comfort to Margaret, and she would talk openly with him, and it seems that they remained good friends. Margaret undergoes investigative surgery for a persistent bloody cough. She did have surgery in 1985, aged 54, which ruled out cancer, yet within months of the biopsy, Margaret was back to smoking 30 cigarettes a day. She had cut down, to be fair. Pre-op, she was smoking 60 a day. At Edward's 21st birthday party, Margaret again asks Liz to give her more responsibility and jobs to do, but with Edward turning 21 and superseding Mary in rank, she can't even deputise in matters of state anymore. Margaret jets off to Mustique, where Charles pays her a visit. The 1937 Regency Act did restrict the number of senior royals who were called on to deputise to 6. Charles tells Margaret that Diana is pregnant again, but it's made them more quarrelsome instead of bringing them closer together. Charles has been seeing a therapist and wants Margaret to do the same, which she does when she gets back to London. She's very resistant at first, puts on airs and graces, but opens up about feeling down. When asked about family with mental health problems, Margaret finds out that her and Elizabeth's first cousins, Catherine and Nerissa Bowes-Lyon, are kept in the Earlswood Institution for Mental Defectives in Redhill. Liz thought they were dead. They're listed as having died. Nerissa, February 1940, and Catherine, 1961. Margaret did go and see a therapist in 1966 at the persuasion of Tony. Margaret told a friend, "I lasted one session. I didn't like it at all. Perfectly useless." The cousins, born in 1919 and 1926 respectively, daughters of the Queen Mother's brother John, were secretly sent to Earlswood in 1941 because they had severe learning difficulties, which might have raised concerns about the Queen's genetic lineage. Margaret takes Dazzle to Redhill to investigate. Margaret waits in the car in the rain while Daz goes in under the guise of a Catholic priest and discovers they're alive. They have family pictures and they know who Liz and Margaret are. There are 3 more cousins of Margaret in there too who are equally afflicted. Margaret goes straight to her mother for an explanation as to why they've been so cruelly dumped and why anyone who doesn't fit the mould gets declared dead. The Queen Mother explains their professionally diagnosed idiocy and imbecility. That's what it was called back then. That's not me being a jerk. Threatens the integrity of the royal bloodline. The gene pool has to be unquestionable. Whether Dazzle went, we don't know, but the hospital confirmed there is no record of there ever being received a visit from the royals. It's doubtful Margaret discovered them in the way that was depicted. Their existence actually came out as a public scandal in 1987. There were another 3 relatives in Earlswood, the Feign Sisters, who were first cousins to the Bowes-Lyons, Edonia Elizabeth, Rosemary Jean, and Ethelgerida Flavia. Therapists say the recessive gene responsible for the cousins' severe developmental disorder comes from their mother's side. So the Queen's mother, brother John, his wife Fenella, comes from her side. It's true it came from Fenella's father, George Trefusis, the 21st Baron Clinton, and it explains why Fenella's nieces were also affected. Margaret is prescribed medication. Daz begs her to go to Rome and become a Catholic. Margaret toyed with the idea as the Anglican Church didn't speak to her. But she won't give up her titles. Daz returned to England after being ordained anyway, and she asks to have no further contact from him, but for him to pray for her. That's not true. They actually remained on really good terms, often debating philosophical matters. We leave Margaret back in Mustique, smoking and drinking, singing and dancing once again. In 1987, when the identities of Nerissa and Catherine were revealed by the press, a statement from Buckingham Palace said that Liz was aware, but that it was a matter for the immediate family only. However, Nerissa, who had died in 1986, was given a proper headstone by her family, having previously been laid to rest in a grave marked only by a plastic tag and serial number, in a funeral that none of the Windsors attended. Catherine Bowes-Lyons died in 2014. Mental illness did carry a stigma back then, with descendants of the Trefusis family labelled mad blood by nobility. Lady Anne Glenconner, former lady-in-waiting to Margaret, wrote in her autobiography that her Trefusis blood scuppered a potential marriage to Johnny Althorpe, Princess Diana's dad, when Johnny's dad, Jack Earl Spencer, found out and wouldn't risk contaminating his earldom through mad blood. Episode 8, 48-1. We have a flashback to Cape Town in 1947, and Liz is giving a speech on her 21st birthday to the Commonwealth. Michael Shea hands over his huge book, Ixion's Wheel of Threnody, to his publisher / agent, which was Bloomsbury in London. Shea is the palace press secretary. In South Africa, apartheid reaches a fever pitch with police brutality against black civilians. 48 of the Commonwealth countries are committed to imposing economic sanctions on South Africa to try and bring down the apartheid regime, and Thatcher is not backing down on agreeing to help. In 1986, the Commonwealth leaders did stand together, ready to impose sanctions on South Africa. First implemented by the National Party of South Africa in 1948, the discriminatory system of racial segregation, which the white minority imposed on the non-white majority, was horrific, bloody and brutal, and too much to go into in this video. I'll put a link below so you can find out more about the atrocities of the apartheid regime. 48 of the 49 Commonwealth nations had agreed a programme of economic sanctions, and Britain stood alone in its refusal to back these plans. Why? In short, Thatcher was opposed to economic sanctions of any sort, and she felt they wouldn't work and they were a crime against free trade. And funnily enough, Dennis Thatcher also had business interests in South Africa. Funny that. Andrew is getting married to Sarah Fergie Ferguson, the original Fergie, the OG Fergie. Move over Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas. This is the original Fergie. He's having Edward as his best man. Liz addresses the Commonwealth of Nations in the Bahamas and meets Thatcher on board her yacht to discuss South Africa. Liz practically orders Thatcher to sign a statement condemning South Africa. She won't sign anything with sanctions mentioned, nor mentions of economic proposals, measures, controls, protocols, limits, instructions, etc., etc., etc. Shea eventually gets her to agree on signals. which Thatcher signs. The Commonwealth leaders have a photograph taken. Liz refuses to squash rumours that she's at odds with Thatcher. The audience between the two of them is frosty, with Thatcher telling Liz she is older and grew up without titles or large houses and got where she is through sheer grit. There's no heated meeting between the two, and Thatcher would have been an absolute idiot to say that to Liz, to put it bluntly. Andrew, Duke of York, is annoyed the papers are making more of his mum and Thatcher than his upcoming wedding. Shay is thrown under the bus as the palace source behind the damaging headlines, despite his protestations to the story being run and him doing all he can in terms of damage limitation. He is sacked/resigns as press secretary. Shay had previously refused to do an expose on Whitehall and Buckingham Palace under a pseudonym. Will he now agree to it? On the 20th of July 1986, the Sunday Times ran an explosive front-page scoop claiming Liz felt privately that Thatcher's approach was uncaring, confrontational and socially divisive. The source was Shay, who, according to the paper, was fully aware the article would be published. Thatcher was desperately hurt by the accusation of being uncaring, and Liz was mortified that their dirty linen was being made public. She called Thatcher to apologise, and they had a very amicable conversation, according to Liz's private secretary, William Heseltine. Rather than forcing him to resign, the palace actually stood by Shay, but he knew his days were numbered, and after a decent interval he moved on, announcing his resignation in March of 1987, 8 months after the scandal. And then we have an end note. The palace continues to insist that the Queen had never expressed an opinion or passed judgment on any of her prime ministers. Michael Shay went on to have a successful career as a best-selling author of political thrillers. In 1994, apartheid fell and Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. When asked whether sanctions helped bring an end to apartheid, he replied, "Oh, there is no doubt." It's important to say, though, that Thatcher did communicate privately with the South African government during this time, and she did condemn their actions. She had a certain amount of respect and sway with them because she wasn't jumping on the Commonwealth sanctions bandwagon. Overall, it's hard to tell, but it's thought by economists that sanctions probably did help speed up the fall of the apartheid regime. Episode 9, Avalanche. Quickly, before we dive into this episode, what is not shown in the last episode and will probably be covered next season is the marriage of Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. Andrew and Fergie were married at Westminster Abbey on the 23rd of July 1986, 3 days after the headline. They got engaged after only a year of dating. Andrew did choose Edward to be his best man, but there was no drama about this choice, and Charles gave a reading at the ceremony. 4-year-old Prince William was a page boy and wore a sailor's outfit in honour of Andrew's naval career. An estimated 500 million people watched around the world. They welcomed their first child together, Princess Beatrice, on the 8th of August 1988, followed by Eugenie on the 23rd of March 1990, divorcing in May 1996, but remaining close friends. Now let's get into episode 9. The Royal Opera Gala event for Charles's 37th birthday. Diana makes a surprise appearance on stage, dancing to rapturous applause. Charles feels overshadowed again. They were clapping for 8 minutes on their feet. Charles says Diana is self-absorbed and goes off to Highgrove, back to Camilla. Diana did perform a 3-minute dance to Uptown Girl alongside ballet star Wayne Sleep at the Royal Opera House in December 1985, not for Charles's birthday, but as a Christmas present. This was at a private gala for supporters of the Royal Ballet. Charles wasn't terribly impressed and did think she was showing off. On the 10th of March 1988, there's an avalanche at Cloisters where Charles and Diana are skiing with a group of friends. A rescue operation is underway to find him. A male body has been found awaiting identification. Menai Bridge is the code name for the death of the Prince of Wales. Liz is London Bridge, the Queen Mother is Tay Bridge, and Philip is Forth Bridge. Liz explains to Philip that bridges are a link between this life and the next. All these code names are real. Fourth bridge, stand down. Charles is confirmed as safe. Their friend Patricia Palmer Tompkinson is in intensive care, and the body is found to be that of Hugh Lindsay. Here's what actually happened. At 2:45 p.m. on the 10th of March 1988, Charles was caught in an avalanche that did kill one of his closest friends, Major Hugh Lindsay, former equerry to Liz. Lindsay's wife, Sarah, who worked in Buckingham Palace press office, was pregnant with a baby girl when her husband died. They'd been married for less than a year. Patricia Palmer Tompkinson broke both legs in the accident. Charles and other members of the group had managed to ski to safety. Diana and Fergie were safely back at the chalet, having never ventured out with the group that day. The party flew home the following day, accompanying the body of 34-year-old Major Hugh Lindsay. Liz visits Anne to get the scoop on the Wales' marriage. Things are not good. The age chasm, totally different personalities, Charles and Camilla. After Harry was born and the duty was done, they had an heir and a spare. They stopped trying altogether and sought solace in the arms of others. Diana had been with her bodyguard and her riding instructor, and Margaret says Kensington Palace is a revolving door of suitors, and it's even worse than the papers are reporting. Liz calls a meeting with them both, telling them their marriage cannot fail. It will call the stability of the crown into question. Diana says she wants it to work, and Liz asks why then has she broken her vows. Diana says Charles's brush with death made her realise how petty they'd been to one another, and she couldn't bear to lose him. Charles isn't given a chance to even speak and goes straight to Camilla afterwards. Diana gives Major Hewitt and the rest of the Plan Bs the heave-ho. Charles says to Camilla that as soon as Diana strays, he'll end it, while continuing to find ways to see Camilla even during his and Diana's wedding anniversary. By 1987, Charles and Camilla were romantically involved again, and by the ski trip in 1988, the marriage was completely beyond salvaging. The talk with Liz may have happened, but if it did, she'd completely changed her tune come 1995 when she actually instructed the two to divorce. Diana's lovers. In 1985, she fell for her bodyguard Barry Manicky. He was dismissed a year later and died in a motorbike accident a year after that. Di always suspected foul play in his death. In 1986, a 5-year affair with Major James Hewitt began. 2 years after Harry's birth, for everyone who's convinced he's Harry's dad, he's not. That's it for the people Diana was linked with in the 80s. No doubt we will get into the 90s next season. Diana has made plans at Highgrove for their anniversary and drives there with the boys, singing happily to Queen in the car. Diana was friends with Freddie Mercury, that is a fact. At Highgrove, pictures of Camilla are being removed from Charles's bedroom and replaced with ones of Diana. Camilla's lingerie is removed from his bedroom too. Charles buys Diana a history of her ancestral home, and she gives him a VHS tape of her performing All I Ask of You on stage from Phantom of the Opera, and he's really not impressed and says it's monstrous. Diana did record this tape for Charles, subject of debate as to whether she sang it or whether she kind of lip-synced and mimed it. We have no idea what Charles's reaction was, and the tape has never been released. Charles asks Camilla if he can get out of his marriage, would she divorce Andrew? She says what they want and what they can have are two very different things, which is true because Camilla would be even less marriageable for the Prince of Wales after a divorce. Charles rejects Diana's calls. She attends lavish events alone, surrounded by paparazzi, dancing till she drops. She calls Major Hewitt back finally, and he comes to spend the night at Kensington Palace. Charles is immediately informed. Diana was having an affair with Hewitt at that time, and Charles was back on with Camilla. By 1988, they were largely leading separate lives. Andrew and Camilla wouldn't divorce until January of 1995, and only then because Charles had admitted his adultery to TV presenter Jonathan Dimbleby. If Charles had not given that interview, they wouldn't have parted ways that soon. And finally, we're on to episode 10, War. Sir Geoffrey Howe resigns from Parliament and absolutely rips into Thatcher during his resignation speech. Thatcher takes herself home to bed and sobs at her longest ally's portrayal. Plausible. Geoffrey Howe did do this on the 13th of November 1990. I will drop the link to watch that speech below. This was a big deal, as he was Deputy Prime Minister and he had been with her since 1979. And this provokes a vote of no confidence in Thatcher as Prime Minister. She surges forward with the situation in the Gulf, trying to ignore the leadership challenge by Michael Heseltine. The first ballot is 4 short and goes to a second vote. She meets with ministers who tell her she doesn't consult them enough, rules by decree, lacks compassion, and totally disregards the middle ground. The time may come for her to stand down. Dennis is absolutely livid on his wife's behalf. Thatcher refuses to back down, sending more troops to the Gulf. What is the Gulf, you ask? Let's try and make this brave. The Persian Gulf War 1990-91 was triggered by Iraq invading Kuwait on August 2nd, 1990. The UN Secretary Council called for Iraq to withdraw. They ignored them, and on the 6th of August the council imposed a worldwide trade ban on Iraq. In November, the UN authorised the use of all means necessary force against Iraq if they didn't withdraw by mid-January 91. On the 17th of January, the US went in with airstrikes, along with smaller forces from Britain, France, Germany, the Soviet Union, Georgia, Algeria, Tunisia, and many more allies. By mid-February, attacks on the ground began until a ceasefire was finally called on February 28, 1991. Under the terms of this, Iraq would recognise Kuwait's sovereignty and get rid of all its weapons of mass destruction. And that will be very important later on when a Mr. Tony Blair becomes Prime Minister. Watch this space. Thatcher asks Liz to dissolve Parliament and Liz says no, saying power is not authority. She should retain her dignity and step down. Meanwhile, Charles and Diana. Charles is trying to convince Liz to let him divorce Diana. The couple put on appearances at Ludgrove School, where Diana cheers Will on enthusiastically at his rugby game. She was a very proud, hands-on, clapping and cheering kind of mum, I will say that. Diana is due to go to New York for 4 days. Charles's team fears for her mental health. She actually went in 1989. In New York, the press follow her everywhere and it's beginning to overwhelm her. She attends a party where she dances with John Travolta. No, this happened in November 1985 while Diana and Charles were on a trip to the White House together. And why did they leave that out? Because that must have made Charles absolutely furious. That would have been some good drama. Diana purges in the bathroom at the end of the night. A Harlem hospital is Diana's final stop on the tour. She visits a paediatric AIDS unit where she hugs the children, which was absolutely revolutionary at the time, as it still wasn't known how AIDS was transmitted fully. It's arguably that moment that solidified her reputation as the people's princess. She'd actually been an advocate for HIV and AIDS for a few years already by then. In 1987, she opened the first AIDS ward in the UK at Middlesex Hospital, where she refused to wear gloves when shaking hands with patients. Back home, Camilla tells Charles to drop the idea of a divorce. She doesn't want to go against Diana in a popularity contest and be painted as a villain. Thatcher stands down and leaves Downing Street after 11 years. The Iron Lady cracks and shows a little emotion. Liz calls Thatcher to her to say goodbye and commends her on the way she dealt with the stuffy old men in her cabinet. She thanks her for her devotion to the country and awards her the Order of Merit, which is an order bestowed by the Queen's discretion alone, regardless of rank, and granted solely on deeds. Did Thatcher not even say thank you or goodbye? That's highly unlikely. Thatcher's tenure as PM ended on the 28th of November 1990. Thatcher was granted one of the highest honours in the land 2 weeks after her resignation for her years of service. Thatcher was largely hated by the average person. Wars, poll tax, miners' strikes, privatising everything she could. Will definitely do a Herstory episode on this complex and polarising character. Thatcher asking Liz to dissolve Parliament has been called a colossal invention by historian Dominic Sandbrook, and that there was no time for her to attend the palace. She resigned the morning after speaking to her ministers, on the 22nd of November to her cabinet and formally to the Queen on the 28th. After the Order of Merit, Dennis was made a Sir, and in 1992 Thatcher was given a life peerage as Baroness Thatcher of Kensington in Lincolnshire, which entitled her to sit in the House of Lords. Don't know if she ever did. Charles goes to Kensington. Diana is hoping for congratulations on a triumphant tour, but Charles calls her selfish, theatrically hugging the wretched and dispossessed. He rages that Diana has upset Camilla and he wants out of this grotesque misalliance. I doubt Charles used those words exactly. He's actually quite a champion of the average man, believe it or not. But he was upset she'd outshone him yet again, and the royals as a whole did feel that she was showing off a bit. The marriage wasn't going well, but the two didn't actually properly separate until 1992. A Christmas family party at Sandringham. Liz dodges speaking to Diana in private and tells Charles he has everything he could ever need. He embarrasses his wife by betraying her at every turn, and it's his fault Diana has psychological problems and an eating disorder, that he's a spoilt, immature man, constantly complaining, married to a spoilt, immature woman, and everyone is heartily sick of them making spectacles of themselves. She will not allow them to separate or divorce, and he needs to start behaving like a future king if he means to be one someday. Liz likely probably did take this stance at first, but a few years later she was the one telling them to go and get a divorce. Liz goes up to Diana's room to check on her and she confides in him. He reassures her that Charles will come around and that they all think Charles is quite mad. Diana says if she's not given the love and security she needs, she'll have to break away officially. Philip warns her not to do that, quite menacingly. He sympathises as a fellow outsider and says everyone in this system is a lost, lonely, irrelevant outsider, apart from the only person that really matters, Liz. Diana gets dressed up, goes downstairs and puts on a brave face for the family photograph. It is highly unlikely that Philip would have entered Diana's bedroom. That's completely inappropriate. They may have had the conversation elsewhere, but historian Penny Dura thinks it's unlikely Philip would have threatened Diana. I suspect that's purely foreshadowing for the next season and what is to come for Diana. The pair did talk about Charles through affectionate letters, which were leaked by her butler in 2003. But that is all we know, really, about the relationship between Diana and Philip and them all sort of intimate conversations. So that is the end of season 4 of The Crown. Season 5 is expected to land on November 2022. So find me back here then. Until then, put your suggestions in the comment section below as to which TV series, film, book, musical, whatever you would like this historian to react to. Or you can find me on my socials, my Instagram and my Twitter, and everything are in the description box below, as is my PO box if you would like to write to me or send me a letter or something. You can find that all below. Don't forget to subscribe, like or dislike, I don't care, it all helps the algorithm, and share this with someone if you know someone that likes historical deep dives. Once again, a reminder to please not fill the comment section with any hate towards Charles and Camilla. They are people and people make mistakes, and we are here for the history and for the drama, but not to be nasty to anybody. This is a very nice community and I'd like to keep it that way, please. So finally, I would like to say a big thank you to all my new public subscribers. Names here. If you've subscribed and your name is not here, it's because you have your sub set to private and so I can't see you. So if you have subscribed and you would like to be shouted out in my next video, comment below. I would also like to thank the following people for their lovely comments that have been insightful, informative, provoked discussion, or just plain made me smile. I would particularly like to say thank you to CSL797, who is the expert in everything Renaissance Italy, who I had an incredible discussion with over everything Medici, and we are going to be doing a collab at some point around May, June time. Don't quote us, we've both got stuff going on in our lives, but guys, this guy knows his stuff. It's gonna be brilliant. I'd also like to say thank you to Mystic Fire for the lovely comment you left me about the loss of my granddad and the nature of grief. And actually, although it was a year since my granddad had passed, I actually received it the day after I had to have my little 16-year-old dog put down. And it was an enormous comfort to me. So thank you. Your comment was beautiful and it really helped. So thank you so much. I also want to give a shout out to Slanted Night Sky, another fibro warrior who left me another really, really beautiful message. And I just want to say that you inspire me too. Also, lastly, before I go, I want to give a massive shout out to the Spark Company, where I got this strong female lead t-shirt, and I also got this awesome Queen of Cups hoodie. I do read tarot, so I thought this was a really cool burlesque interpretation of the Queen of Cups. Predictably, being me, I've already got like bolognese on the front of it, which is why I'm not wearing it, but it's very, very cool, and I just wanted to give them a shout out. Look them up, the Spark Company. Every purchase from them helps a woman in need. I think that is everyone. Without further ado, here's the bloopers, because there's always bloopers. Enjoy. See you next time.
Missy! Missy, can I have a cuddle, Missy? Oh, Missy. Hi, baby.
Hi, honey. Hey, Miss. Oh, okay. You want to go down? Okay.
Go on then. You're in the way. You get down too.
I have a dog. Hello, dog. Hi. Lord Mountbatten heads out from Castleblown Castle in Northern Ireland on a boat with his daughter and grandsons.
The puppies are sleeping.
Well done. Falling again, got itchy head, man. Falling again, I'm falling. IRA member Thomas McMahon.
Hi, the miss. Hi, the beautiful Missy. Hey, sweet boy. Hi, sweet boy. I'm just filming my thing. I'm on episode 4. I am. That's just my baby dog. That's just my baby dog. That's just my baby dog. It's my baby dog over there. 1, 2, 3 baby dogs. I love you, and I love you.
Charles? No, not Charles. Not Charles, man. Yes, woof. The paper went all floppy. Hamish is eating his foot. Is that a tasty foot, Mish? Is that a tasty foot? Tasty foot? Good? Yes? Okay. I've still got blue hair dye under my nail. I don't know how that got under my nail. I wore gloves, man. I wore gloves. Just have blue nails. A blue meanie. You attacked me. You attacked me. Evil digger. I think that's everything. Be good. Stay safe. And I'll see you next time.